Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most dramatic and talked about events in recent times, the Crimea Bridge explosion and Vladimir Putin's furious reaction to it. This event has shaken not just Russia and Ukraine, but the entire world is watching closely as tensions rise once again. The bridge, often called the Kerch Bridge, is more than just a piece of infrastructure. It's a powerful symbol of Russia's control over Crimea, and its damage carries both emotional and strategic weight for the Kremlin. When news broke that a massive explosion had ripped through the bridge connecting Crimea to mainland Russia, the shockwave wasn't just physical, it was political, military, and psychological. Footage showed flames and thick smoke rising over the bridge, with portions of the road and railway collapsing into the water below. Immediately, questions began flooding in. Who did it? How did they manage such a precise strike on one of Russia's most heavily guarded assets? And most importantly, what would Putin do next? Putin's reaction was immediate and filled with anger. In his address, he called the attack a terrorist act orchestrated by Ukrainian intelligence services. His tone was one of both fury and humiliation. Fury, because one of his country's most prized infrastructures had been attacked, and humiliation because it struck at the core of his image of strength and control. The Crimea Bridge isn't just a logistical route. It's a statement of Russian dominance over Crimea, a region annexed from Ukraine in 2014. For years, Russia portrayed the bridge as a symbol of unity and progress, and now it lay broken, burning, and merged in the waters of the Kerch Strait. Putin's Security Council convened almost immediately after the explosion. Russian media outlets were quick to publish official statements condemning Ukraine while also hinting at internal investigations. At the same time, Russian social media began filling with anger, despair, and calls for revenge. The explosion wasn't just a blow to Russia's infrastructure, it was a blow to national pride. For many Russians, the bridge represented the tangible proof of Crimea's return to Russia, and seeing it destroyed was like seeing the country's authority challenged in real time. Ukrainian officials, on the other hand, were more subtle. While Kiev did not officially claim responsibility at first, many Ukrainian figures posted cryptic messages on social media, images of the damaged bridge accompanied by jokes, emojis, and celebratory remarks. These reactions were widely interpreted as indirect confirmation that Ukraine had orchestrated or supported the operation. The psychological warfare aspect was clear. Beyond the physical destruction, Ukraine wanted to show Russia and the world that even the most secure Russian sites were vulnerable. For the Kremlin, this was a nightmare scenario. Putin had invested heavily in portraying the war in Ukraine as a controlled and successful operation. The explosion challenged that image directly. In response, Russia launched a massive wave of missile strikes across Ukraine in the following days, hitting energy infrastructure, residential areas, and critical facilities. These attacks were described as retaliatory measures, but in reality, they were acts of rage, an attempt to restore the image of strength that had been shattered along with the bridge. Inside Russia, state-controlled media began emphasizing the narrative of revenge and patriotism. Talk shows repeated Putin's message that Russia was under attack by Western-backed terrorists. Analysts loyal to the Kremlin called for harsher actions, even suggesting targeting Ukrainian leadership or cutting off all power to the country. The mood inside Russia shifted from uncertainty to defiance, but beneath that defiance, cracks were starting to show. Many citizens began to question how such a large-scale explosion could happen under the nose of Russian intelligence and military surveillance. If the bridge wasn't safe, what else wasn't? Military experts noted that the bridge's strategic importance was enormous. It was the main supply route for transporting military equipment, fuel, and goods from Russia to its troops stationed in southern Ukraine and Crimea. With the bridge damaged, Russian logistics were thrown into chaos. Supplies had to be rerouted through longer and riskier land and sea routes, slowing down operations and creating vulnerabilities. Ukrainian analysts called this a masterstroke, not only a symbolic victory, but a tactical one that could weaken Russian offensives in the south. Putin, known for his cold and calculated image, could not afford to appear weak. In his public appearances after the explosion, his expression was visibly tense. Reports suggested that he demanded immediate answers from the FSB and other security agencies. The internal pressure on his administration intensified. Rumors began circulating about possible purges within Russian security circles, with accusations of negligence and failure to protect a critical national asset. For a leader like Putin, whose rule depends heavily on the perception of control, this incident represented an intolerable embarrassment. The explosion also sent ripples across international politics. Western nations viewed it as a potential turning point in the war. The attack demonstrated Ukraine's growing capability to strike deep into Russian-held territory, something that was previously considered almost impossible. NATO members praised Ukraine's resilience, though most avoided directly commenting on the bridge attack itself. Washington and European capitals feared that an overly strong response might provoke Russia into further escalation, possibly even nuclear threats. Meanwhile, within Russia, hardliners accused the West of helping plan the operation, pointing fingers at NATO intelligence sharing. As global analysts dissected the footage and satellite images, various theories emerged about how the explosion was carried out. Some suggested that it was a truck bomb detonated on the bridge's road section. Others believed it might have been a sea-borne drone attack, or even a combination of both. Russian investigators initially claimed it was a truck explosion, identifying suspects and showing CCTV clips. However, independent experts noted inconsistencies in the footage and timelines. It was clear that Russia wanted to quickly present a controlled version of the story to maintain public confidence. In Ukraine, the attack was celebrated as a psychological victory. The Crimea Bridge had always been a hated symbol of Russian occupation. Its partial destruction became a rallying cry across Ukrainian cities, boosting morale at a critical time in the war. Posters, songs, and memes spread rapidly online, portraying the explosion as a moment of justice. For ordinary Ukrainians, it was proof that the seemingly untouchable could be touched, that Russia's power was not absolute. Putin's angry response included not only missile strikes, but also renewed calls for military mobilization. The rhetoric intensified. He vowed that any further attacks on Russian territory would be met with decisive and harsh consequences. Yet behind the strong words, analysts saw signs of desperation. The war was dragging on longer than the Kremlin anticipated, and domestic dissent was slowly rising. Even within Putin's inner circle, frustration was reportedly growing over military failures and the impact of Western sanctions. The psychological effect of the bridge explosion on Putin personally cannot be overstated. For years, he had made the Crimea Bridge one of his proudest achievements. He personally inaugurated it in 2018, driving a truck across the span to symbolize Russia's triumph in reclaiming Crimea. The image was meant to immortalize his legacy. Now, those same images resurfaced online, this time accompanied by footage of the burning structure, a cruel reversal of symbolism. The event dented his carefully crafted aura of invincibility. As days turned into weeks, Russia began repairing the bridge with impressive speed. Construction crews worked around the clock under military protection. Propaganda outlets highlighted the resilience of Russian engineers and the leadership's ability to restore order. But no matter how fast the bridge was fixed, the message had already been sent. Ukraine could reach into what Russia considered its most secure heartland. Strategically, the explosion forced Russia to divert resources to defend other key infrastructures like air bases, railways, and command centers. The cost of maintaining security across occupied territories skyrocketed. Ukrainian forces, emboldened by their success, continued pushing southward, targeting Russian supply lines and depots. The momentum of the war began to tilt, however slightly, toward Ukraine. In international circles, the incident reignited debates about how far Ukraine should go in its counter-offensive strategy. Some Western allies urged caution, fearing escalation. Others argued that striking such symbolic targets was necessary to weaken Russian morale and logistics. Inside Ukraine, however, the mood was resolute. The bridge explosion became a symbol of national resistance, a demonstration that the fight for freedom was far from over. Meanwhile, within Russia, censorship tightened. Media outlets were ordered to follow the official narrative strictly. Journalists who questioned the government's account were silenced or dismissed. Social media platforms blocked discussions that suggested internal sabotage or incompetence. Still, whispers persisted that the attack might have involved inside help or failures within the security apparatus. Every rumor added to the growing atmosphere of paranoia inside Moscow. Putin's relationship with his generals also became more strained. Reports indicated disagreements between military leadership and political figures about the next steps. Some wanted full escalation. Others warned that the army was already stretched thin. The bridge explosion magnified those divisions, making it clear that the war's momentum was slipping away from Russia's control. As winter approached, the logistical challenges worsened. The partially repaired bridge could only handle limited traffic, and alternative routes were vulnerable to further attacks. Ukrainian drones and missiles continued testing Russian defenses. Each new explosion, even smaller ones, served as reminders that the war was far from over and that Russia's sense of security had been permanently shaken. Putin, however, continued projecting confidence in his public speeches. He praised the engineers rebuilding the bridge and promised that Russia would emerge stronger. But behind closed doors, intelligence analysts believe he became increasingly isolated, relying on a shrinking circle of loyal advisors. The emotional tone of his later speeches, angry, defiant, and accusatory, suggested a leader under immense pressure. Economically, the explosion also had ripple effects. Transport disruptions impacted supply chains between mainland Russia and Crimea, causing shortages of fuel and goods. Tourism in Crimea plummeted, and local residents began expressing fears about safety. Even with heavy censorship, videos emerged online showing long queues at gas stations and supermarkets. For many in Crimea, the illusion of stability under Russian rule had been shattered. As the months passed, the Crimea Bridge was gradually repaired and reopened to limited traffic. Russian media celebrated the event as proof of national resilience, but the scars, both physical and psychological, remained. The world had witnessed a moment that symbolized the vulnerability of even the most powerful nations. For Putin, the explosion became a reminder that his war had entered a phase he could no longer fully control. The story of the Crimea Bridge explosion is more than just a tale of destruction. It's a story about pride, symbolism, and the high stakes of modern warfare. It revealed how infrastructure can become a weapon, how psychology can be as powerful as firepower, and how one explosion can shake the confidence of an entire regime. In the end, Putin's angry reaction wasn't just about the loss of a bridge. It was about the loss of control, the loss of image, and the realization that the conflict he began had grown beyond his command. The explosion marked a turning point, not because it ended the war, but because it exposed the cracks in the image of invincibility that the Kremlin had spent decades building. Today, the bridge stands again, rebuilt and reinforced. But no matter how strong it looks, the memory of that day, the fire, the smoke, and the humiliation lingers. It serves as a constant reminder to Russia, to Ukraine, and to the world that even symbols of power can fall in an instant. The Crimea Bridge explosion will be remembered not only as a military incident, but as a defining psychological moment in this long, brutal conflict. It reshaped strategies, redefined perceptions, and reminded everyone that the war is as much about narrative as it is about territory. Putin's fury may have been loud, but the echoes of that blast continue to speak louder across Crimea, across Russia, and across the world. And that's where we'll leave it for today. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates and deep analysis on global events. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.